Elena Martinez had always believed that some chapters of life were meant to stay closed forever. At 34, she had built a comfortable routine around her small lakeside cottage, teaching piano lessons to neighborhood children and tending to her garden where roses bloomed in defiant beauty against the harsh Michigan winters. Her divorce 3 years ago had left her cautious about opening her heart again, but she had found peace in solitude. That peace was about to be shattered in the most unexpected way. The sound of moving trucks rumbling down Maple Street on a crisp September morning caught her attention as she watered her morning glories. Through her kitchen window, she watched as furniture was being carried into the Henderson house next door. The same house that had sat empty for 2 years since old Mrs. Henderson passed away. Eleanor's heart skipped when she recognized the familiar figure directing the movers. David Henderson was back. But this wasn't the awkward 18-year-old boy she remembered from years ago. The young man standing in the driveway, his sleeves rolled up as he lifted boxes with surprising strength, had transformed into someone entirely different. His shoulders had broadened, his boyish face had sharpened into handsome angles, and there was a confidence in his movements that hadn't been there before. At 22, David had grown into the kind of man who could make a woman forget her own name. Elena quickly stepped back from the window, her cheeks flushing with an emotion she didn't want to acknowledge. This was ridiculous. She had known David since he was in high school, had watched him struggle with algebra at her kitchen table when his grandmother asked her to tutor him. The age gap that had once seemed vast 12 years now felt different, but still complicated in ways she couldn't quite name. The doorbell rang that afternoon, interrupting her piano lesson with 7-year-old Lily Chen. Elena opened the door to find David standing on her porch, and her breath caught in her throat. Up close, his transformation was even more striking. His dark hair was longer now, touching his collar, and his brown eyes held depths that spoke of experiences and growth she couldn't begin to imagine. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, his voice deeper. Then she remembered, with a warmth that made her stomach flutter. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "It's Elena," she corrected softly, acutely aware of how formal Mrs. sounded coming from him. "And please, come in. I was just finishing up a lesson." David stepped inside, and Elena caught a hint of his cologne, something woody and masculine, that made her hyper-aware of how close he was standing. She noticed how his eyes took in her living room, lingering on the piano where little Lily was still practicing scales. "I wanted to thank you," David said after Lily's mother had picked her up, "for everything you did for my grandmother. She talked about you constantly in her letters." Eleanor's heart clenched. "She was wonderful. I miss her terribly." "She left me the house," David continued, settling into the armchair across from her sofa, "along with some instructions I'm still trying to figure out." There was something in his tone that made Elena look up sharply. "Instructions?" David leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "She left me a letter. In it, she told me that some things are worth waiting for, and that timing isn't always what we think it is." He paused, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "She mentioned you specifically, Elena. She said you were the kindest, most beautiful woman she'd ever known, and that someone worthy of your heart would come along when you least expected it." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. She was always a romantic at heart. "There's more," David said quietly. "She told me that she'd watch me grow up, watch me make mistakes and learn from them. She said that when I was ready, truly ready, I would know what I wanted. And she was right." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Eleanor's rational mind screamed warnings, but her heart was beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "David, I know what you're thinking," he interrupted gently. "I know about the years between us, about how you remember me as a kid struggling with homework at your kitchen table. But I'm not that boy anymore, Elena. College didn't just teach me about business and economics. It taught me about myself, about what I want from life. Elena stood abruptly, moving to the window to put distance between them. This is complicated. Only if we make it complicated, David replied, rising to follow her. I've known for years how I felt about you. Even when I was 18 and too young to understand what that meant, I knew. You were patient with me, kind when I was struggling, and you never made me feel stupid when I couldn't grasp a concept. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. You were my student, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. 2 months, 4 years ago, David said, now standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. But what I felt for you had nothing to do with tutoring and everything to do with the woman who brought me lemonade on hot afternoons and who smiled at me like I mattered. Elena turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You did matter. You do matter. But David, people will talk. They'll say what? He challenged gently. That a 22-year-old man fell in love with a beautiful 34-year-old woman. That 2 adults chose to explore their feelings for each other. He reached out, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. Elena, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about you. I care about us. The word us hung in the air between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was brave enough to cross. Eleanor's marriage had ended because her ex-husband had found someone younger, someone who made him feel alive again. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now being pursued by someone younger herself. I need time, she said finally. It's overwhelming. David nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. Of course. I'm not going anywhere, Elena. I'm home now, for good. I've got a job lined up at the bank in town, and I'm planning to stay. Whatever time you need, I'll wait. After he left, Elena found herself standing in her kitchen, staring at the spot where David used to sit doing homework. The memory of his 18-year-old self seemed to blur with the image of the man who had just left her breathless and confused. She had built her life around careful choices and safe boundaries. But David's return threatened to dismantle everything. She thought she knew about herself. That night she called her sister Maria in California. Let me get this straight, Maria said, after Elena had explained the situation. A gorgeous, successful young man who's known you for years just declared his feelings for you, and you're worried about what other people will think. It's not that simple, Elena protested. There's history there. He was practically a child when I knew him. Practically a child 4 years ago, but definitely a man now, Maria pointed out. Elena, you've been hiding behind your divorce for 3 years. Maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself for someone else's mistakes. I'm not punishing myself, Elena said. But even as the words left her mouth, she wondered if they were true. Aren't you? You're beautiful, talented, and kind. You have so much love to give, but you're holding back because you're afraid of getting hurt again. This David, does he make you feel alive? Elena closed her eyes, remembering the way her heart had raced when David looked at her, the way her skin had tingled when he'd almost touched her cheek. Yes, she whispered. He does. Then what are you really afraid of? The question haunted Elena for days. She went through her routine teaching lessons, tending her garden, grocery shopping, but her mind kept drifting to David. She saw him working in his grandmother's garden, restoring the flower beds that had been neglected for years. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the fence, and he would smile at her with such warmth that she felt her resolve weakening. On Thursday afternoon, as she was teaching 12-year-old Marcus Williams, She heard David's voice outside. He was talking to someone, his tone animated and happy. Through the window, she saw him with a young woman about his age, blonde and pretty, laughing at something he'd said. Eleanor's stomach dropped, and she realized with startling clarity that she was jealous. The feeling was so intense and unexpected that she made a mistake on the piano, hitting a wrong note that made Marcus look up in confusion. "Sorry," she murmured, trying to focus on the lesson. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, where David was now helping the young woman carry boxes into his house. After Marcus left, Elena found herself standing on her porch, ostensibly checking her mailbox but really trying to get a better look at David's visitor. The woman was beautiful in the effortless way of youth, with long golden hair and a laugh that carried on the autumn breeze. "Elena?" David's voice made her turn. He was walking toward her, alone now, his expression concerned. "Are you okay? You look upset." "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just tired." David studied her face for a moment, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "You saw Jessica?" "It's none of my business," Elena said, turning back toward her door. "She's my cousin," David said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "She's helping me unpack. She's also engaged to her college boyfriend, and about as interested in me romantically as she would be in dating her brother." Elena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. I didn't. You were jealous," David said softly, stepping closer. "And that gives me hope." "David, please." "No, let me finish," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I know you're scared. I know this feels complicated, and maybe even a little crazy. But Elena, what I feel for you isn't some college crush or an infatuation with an older woman. It's deeper than that. It's about the way you make me want to be a better man. It's about how your smile can change my entire day. It's about how I've compared every woman I've ever met to you and found them all lacking." Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. "You don't understand. I'm not the same person I was when you knew me before. My marriage, my divorce, it changed me. I have trust issues, baggage." "We all have baggage," David interrupted. "I'm not the same person either. I've made mistakes, had my heart broken, learned hard lessons about what matters and what doesn't. But through all of that, the constant was you. The memory of your kindness, your strength, your grace. That's what kept me grounded." Elena looked into his eyes and saw something that took her breath away. Not just desire or attraction, but something deeper. Something that looked remarkably like the mature, abiding love she had always dreamed of but never quite found. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I," David admitted. "But I'd like to figure it out together. Have dinner with me, Elena. Not as your former student, not as the neighbor kid, but as the man who's been halfway in love with you for years, and completely in love with you now." Elena's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. She thought about her sister's words, about the way David made her feel alive, about the possibility of love that she had almost convinced herself she didn't deserve. "Okay," she said, the word barely audible. "Okay?" David's face lit up with a smile that made her knees weak. "Okay," she repeated, stronger this time. "But we take this slow. We figure out what this is before we worry about what everyone else thinks." "As slow as you need," David agreed. "I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." That Saturday evening, Elena found herself standing in front of her closet, more nervous than she had been in years. She had changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that made her feel both elegant and comfortable. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath and opened the door to find David standing there, with a bouquet of roses from his grandmother's garden. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration that made her blush. "Thank you," she replied, accepting the flowers. "These are lovely. They're from Grandma's garden. She always said they were the most beautiful roses in the neighborhood, but I think she was wrong." His eyes met hers. "They have some serious competition." Elena laughed, feeling some of her nervousness fade. Smooth talker. "I've been practicing," David admitted with a grin. "I wanted to make sure I got this right." They went to Antonio's, a small Italian restaurant on the other side of town, where the candlelit atmosphere and intimate booths provided the perfect setting for their conversation. Elena found herself relaxing as they talked, discovering that David had indeed grown into a thoughtful, articulate man with opinions and dreams that fascinated her. "Tell me about college," she said as they shared a bottle of wine. "What was it like being away from here for so long?" David's expression grew thoughtful, eye-opening. "I learned a lot about myself, about what I wanted from life. I dated some, but nothing serious. I kept comparing everyone to—" He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "To who?" Elena prompted gently. "To you," he admitted. "I know that probably sounds pathetic, but it's true. I measured every relationship against what I thought love should feel like. And somehow, you were always the standard." Elena felt her heart constrict. "David, you barely knew me. We spent maybe 20 hours together total." "Quality over quantity," he replied. "Those 20 hours showed me who you really were. The way you patiently explained concepts I couldn't grasp. The way you encouraged me when I was frustrated. The way you made me feel like I was capable of more than I believed possible. You saw potential in me that I didn't even know I had." "You always had it," Elena said softly. "I just helped you recognize it." "Exactly," David said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious?" Elena looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt. "I see that in all my students. It's not special." "It is to me," David said firmly. "And it's not just about tutoring, Elena. It's about the way you treated me like I mattered. Like my thoughts and feelings were valid. My parents were going through their divorce that year, and I felt invisible most of the time. But when I was with you, I felt seen." Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. She remembered that time. Remembered the quiet sadness in David's eyes that she had attributed to academic struggles. She hadn't realized he was dealing with his parents' marital problems. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know about your parents." "They worked it out eventually," David said. "But that's not the point. The point is that you gave me something I desperately needed without even knowing it. You gave me hope that there were still good people in the world. People who cared about others without expecting anything in return." "But I did expect something," Elena said quietly. "I expected you to learn, to grow, to become the man I could see you had the potential to be." "And I did," David said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her hand. "I became the man who's sitting here with you right now, telling you that I love you and hoping you'll give us a chance." Elena's breath caught. "David, I know it's soon to say that," he continued. "But I also know what I feel, and I'm not going to pretend it's anything less than love. I love your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. I love the way you light up when you talk about music, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, the way you see the best in people even when they can't see it themselves." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. This is happening so fast. "Only if we think of it as starting now," David said. "But for me, this started years ago. It's just taken me this long to be brave enough to do something about it." They talked until the restaurant was nearly empty, the conversation flowing as easily as if they had been together for years. Elena found herself laughing more than she had in months, her usual caution melting away under David's attentive gaze and genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. When he walked her to her door, Elena felt a familiar flutter of nerves. What happened now? What were the rules for this unprecedented situation? "I had a wonderful time," she said, her key in her hand but making no move to unlock the door. "So did I," David replied, stepping closer. "Elena, I want to kiss you. I've wanted to kiss you since the moment I saw you watering your flowers the other day. But I also want to respect your need to take this slowly." Eleanor's heart was pounding, so hard she was sure he could hear it. She looked into his eyes, seeing patience and desire in equal measure, and made a decision that surprised herself. "I'd like that," she whispered. David's hands came up to cup her face, his touch gentle and reverent. When his lips met hers, Elena felt something she had never experienced before, a kiss that was both tender and passionate, respectful and deeply romantic. It was the kiss of a man who had waited years for this moment and wanted to savor every second. When they finally broke apart, Elena's knees were weak and her heart was racing. "Wow," she breathed. "Yeah," David agreed, his voice husky. "Wow." They stood there for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing each other in. Elena felt as if she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into something that could either be the most beautiful experience of her life or the most devastating. "I should go in," she said reluctantly. "You should," David agreed, but neither of them moved. Finally, Elena stepped back, her hand finding her doorknob. "Thank you for tonight. For everything. Thank you for giving us a chance," David replied. "Sweet dreams, Elena." As she watched him walk back to his house, Elena realized that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. The careful, controlled existence she had built for herself was about to be turned upside down by a man who had somehow managed to grow from the boy she remembered into someone who could make her believe in love again. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her lips still tingling from David's kiss. She thought about his words, about the way he had looked at her, about the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. For the first time in 3 years, Elena Martinez allowed herself to hope. But as she drifted off to sleep, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings about the complications that lay ahead. The age difference, the small-town gossip, the risk of opening her heart to someone who might eventually want something or someone else. Only time would tell if love was strong enough to overcome all of that. The next morning brought a knock on Eleanor's door and a surprise that would test everything she thought she knew about David's feelings for her. Standing on her porch was a woman she didn't recognize, elegant, sophisticated, and holding what looked like an engagement ring. "Are you Elena Martinez?" the woman asked, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested expensive education and worldly experience. "Yes," Elena replied cautiously. "I'm Victoria Ashford," the woman said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I believe we need to talk about David Henderson." Eleanor's heart sank as she realized that her fairy tale romance might be about to become a nightmare. But what Victoria had to say would shock her even more than David's declaration of love ever had. "You see," Victoria continued, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, "David and I have been engaged for 6 months. I've come to bring him home." Elena's world tilted on its axis. Everything David had told her, everything she had begun to believe about their connection, suddenly felt like a lie. But as she looked into Victoria's eyes, she saw something that gave her pause, a desperation that didn't match her confident words. The truth. Elena was about to discover was far more complicated than either woman imagined. And David Henderson was about to find himself in the middle of a situation that would force him to choose between the life he had planned and the love he had never expected to find. What Elena didn't know was that David's shocking revelation was still to come, and it would change everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the courage it takes to fight for what matters most. The story was just beginning,